Pardon me?
The inverse of that is when you walk by with a 5-gallon bucket and all you just leave the lamps and come running up to the fence.
Yep.
It's the same effect.
I'll tell you a quick story on this. I have a friend out in Utah that had always raised purebred Rambouillets and wanted to increase reproductive rate because he knew he could make more money if he marketed more lambs for you. So he comes to me and he sees this data and he wants to take Romanoff crosses out there in the mountains out in Idaho, in Utah. And I'm cautious about this because no one's done this before and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be at all. But he ends up buying some ewes of a quarter Romanoff from us. And he does this 3 or 4 years. And I asked him, you know, behavior-wise, what was going on. And they lamb them in an area there in the valleys by the barns and stuff. And then they'll drive them miles up the roads and get them up into the mountains and stuff. And he was talking about that. And he said the best sheep he had were the Romanoff crosses because they kept their lambs together with them. When they drive them, they would wait, you know, they kept their lambs together and they go up the road. And in straight Rambouillets, they said it'd be a mess because they just walk off and leave their lambs. So they drive them up there and they get up into the mountains, and then you know, there's a lot of activity going on. They're trying to find their old lambs, but the Romanoff crosses for some reason seem to keep their lambs together. So that was interesting to me that he had observed that, and I really didn't know what was going to happen there at all.
Okay, the Romanoffs were probably one of the newer breeds brought into the U.S. and therefore screwed up last by the show.
That's it exactly.
But the Rambouillets, you'd like to think, are kind of an out there in the natural breed. Why are they such terrible mothers compared to the Romanoff? If I mean, you think of a Western ewe being kind of a natural.
Is it environment by phenotype interaction or something like that? Or
Oh, I think that's possible. But
Selection pressure on the wall.
yeah, what have the Rambouillet been selected for? What have producers asked the Rambouillet to do? Produce wool, and if they get one lamb, they're tickled to death, right?
I just talked to a guy
This guy.
down in the hill country. I hadn't seen this guy in a long time. He was at the bull judging contest and at 4-H team. And this guy is focused on wool production. And he raised the lane sheep, which super fine is what he really worked at. But it's interesting. I asked him how he's doing in the sheep deal, and he has really tracked those numbers. And he said, you know, Brian, when we were sharing 10-pound fleeces, we had 85–90% lamb crops. He said, we backed that down. He said, I've looked at backing it down for a few years. He said, we backed down to 8 pounds per ewe, and we're at 115 pounds. And he said, we backed down another pound, and now we're at about 7 pounds per ewe, and we're anywhere from 125 to 130% lamb crops. And those ewes are not being babied. They are having to make it on hill country pasture. But it's
a selection.
Yeah, it's based on, we put so much emphasis on raising wool than we did on being a mom. We did the same thing in the Angora goat industry. An Angora goat is the poorest mother you'll ever see. I mean, she thinks about stress and she will abort because we've just asked her to do nothing but produce milk. And so when you start single trading, you're going to get in the bind.
Throw one other example out there. I think it's consistent with this. We have dairy cows to produce milk. We have beef cattle to produce meat. We don't ask them to do the same thing. We have strains of chickens to lay eggs. We have strains of chickens to produce meat. We don't ask them to do both. And our sheep industry has asked sheep, on average, to produce both wool and lambs. And as a consequence of that, we don't do either one of them very well. I would argue with you that I think there's place in our U.S. sheep industry for a strong wool industry, for breeds that produce good quality fleeces. But I would argue the vast majority of sheep don't need those fleeces. And if we can take the wool off them and produce hair and focus on meat production, we might be better off in the long run at doing that. So I'll show you some data on that in just a bit. Okay, so what happened? I just took here, this is Lamb's Doctor breeding ewe from statistics you get out of the USDA over a 5-year period. And so this would be our typical production system we use, like kind of high input system. This is what we got out of our pasture landing system with no inputs. Okay? So there's a very simple way of looking at this to say that if you use the right kind of sheep, I think, you can increase outputs and decrease inputs at the same time. And that's huge. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, but it is an option, perhaps.
Kreg, is that 187, is that that's that 5-year period, or is that a 3 or
What I did, Ron, because that's a good question. These would be sheep these would become out of flocks where you have ewes from 1 to 8 or 9 or 10 years of age or whatever. In our system, we just measure these through the first 3 years of age. So I just projected what would happen with productivity if we had flock here, the same age structure as what we do here. Okay? I don't think I have a slide here on this. The white Dover Romanoff ewes, by the time they're 3 years of age, they are marketing a little over 2 lambs per ewe on that pasture system. Okay, and this is just one slide to show what we got. We also evaluated out of season breeding in this experiment, and all 5 types of those Romanoff crossbred ewes averaged at least 87% of the ability to breed during May. So it's kind of, again, the common link there's a Romanoff germplasm, but it didn't matter what else was there, they could breed very well out of season. Okay, so where are we at now?
I've got a question.
Yep.
Casey Olson preached about his calving in later spring to meet requirements of the cow. To meet that, he's done that case that sat there to his cow production.
When you say later in the spring, when do you mean?
April.
Later in the spring when the grass is, it depends
You
on
mean
where
spring
you're.
instead of winter?
Right.
Yeah, spring instead of winter, okay. But I mean, what we consider typical when the climate starts, when the weather starts to get. If you take that factor out of your, did you run any of these pasture lambers against at a various other time other than, what is the effect then? On low input system, what's your numbers look like?
If they lamb in March, for example?
If they lamb in March, for example, what happens?
Outside or in a barn?
Outside, what's the?
Well, that's going to be a disaster.
Well, that's my question. You know, when we go to talking about these low input systems, you know, we can low input them, but if we're going to be in the sheep business, we need to be producing sheep year round. I mean, that's the way that
We're not in any danger of everyone lambing out on pasture in Maine.
Well, no, but I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, okay, we're set up for one way to do it, and everybody's.
I'm saying that you're working too hard to do it and not getting enough for your input. Okay? Here's what I would argue. I've tried to find resources to do this, and we haven't done it. But I would be very interested in doing exactly what you said, letting those ewes lamb in a barn, but having the shepherds stay out of the barn in March. So we're not crowding up sheep, and we're not doing all these things in the barn that cause stress.
Not jugging them up.
Not jugging them up, not catching ewes and dragging them around and shoving them into this little pen and having the ewe hop out of the pen and all that kind of stuff that we do.
We've talked about that, some is splitting, and we don't know what the number is.
I don't know what the animal, I don't know what you need for square footage and stuff. I think that would be an issue.
And how many, do you put 10 or do you put 20 in a pen? And just let them do their thing.
I can tell you to that is strategically penning. And that's the one thing that we've done on, and that's, I want to choke my guys working for me because I want breeding dates on those ewes. If we're going to run an intensive management system, I want breeding dates on those ewes. And that's no more, that's easily done, reading the chalk marks the next morning. But what we'll do is we'll start, when we go in and we pin those ewes to lamb, we'll pin 15 ewes together, but they're due to lamb all at different times. And we have several of those pins across the group, but that way we don't have 5 ewes in one pen that are lambing the same night.
How many
Because you do
square-
that in a small kid.